Hey everyone, tonight. We're starting in the middle of a party I wish I'd never attended. There was laughter champagne, and that specific type of smile rich people wear when they're pretending to like each other. I stood there holding a small box wrapped in paper I'd picked out 3 weeks ago, clutching it like a lifeline. And then, clear as crystal, my granddaughter Amber lifted the gift between two fingers, like it might stain her manicure, and said, "This handmade gift looks so cheap. You might think that's where the worst of it happened, but no. That's just where the camera flash would freeze the moment. The real sting was what followed the laughter. My son barked, my daughter-in-law tittered, Logan. The fiancé chuckled like a man who'd just seen a bad meme. And me, I stood there in my good slacks, smiling like someone who had just stepped on glass barefoot, but didn't want to ruin the mood. So before you feel the burn of someone you love, making you feel disposable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you really like what I'm doing here. And hey, let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you right now. Now turn off the lights, maybe turn on the fan for some soft noise, and let's get started tonight. I didn't say anything that day. Just smiled, said happy birthday, sweetheart, and quietly walked out before the sting traveled too far up my spine. Everyone went back to their champagne flutes and delicate laughter. My son Richard didn't even look up from his phone when I left, just called out, "Thanks for coming, Mum," like I'd been a caterer dropping off finger food. By the time I got home, my chest felt like it had been hollowed out with a melon baller. But worse than that was the anger. It wasn't fiery, it was cold, like winter morning frost creeping across the inside of a window. I sat in front of my computer, still in my party clothes, clicking through emails until I saw hers. From Amber. Subject: wedding planning timeline. We've already sent the invitations. The designer begins renovations next month. Your old furniture will need to go. My jaw clicked audibly. I reread it 3 times, trying to find the word please or even a question mark. There were none. That house she was talking about. The Cape Cod beach house James and I had bought 40 years ago with a small inheritance and a lot of dreams. The one where we'd spilled cheap wine on the deck and scattered his ashes along the dunes. She thought it was just a venue. Let me give you a fun fact before we go further. Humans blink about 15-20 times per minute. That night, I'm pretty sure I didn't blink at all. Just stared and stared at her email like it would rewrite itself if I glared hard enough. Old age wisdom moment. Here it is. When people show you what they value, don't ignore them just because you wish it were different. I woke up the next morning and found a brochure slid under my door. It was glossy, smelled like fresh ink, and read in cheerful blue letters, "Seaside Retirement Living, where independence meets support." There was a red circle around a floor plan. Vanessa's handwriting, perfect for Mom. They weren't even pretending anymore. What's wild is they thought they were helping. I'm sure if you asked Richard or Vanessa, they'd say this was all out of love. But love, my dear listeners, doesn't usually come wrapped in financial contracts and elder care recommendations disguised as birthday party gossip. That morning, I brewed my coffee strong and sat at the window with my old knitted shawl draped over my lap. Outside, the city was waking up. Inside, something in me was going very still. Not quiet, still. And stillness is dangerous. It means a decision is forming. You see, I'm not a dramatic person. I don't slam doors. But I do make plans. The only person who noticed I wasn't okay was Thomas, my grandson, Amber's younger brother, the one who sees too much and says too little. He texted me that afternoon. "You left so quickly, Grandma." "You all right?" I typed back, "Just tired, sweetheart." But I think he knew better. Let me add one quirky little fact here. Octopuses have 3 hearts. 3. Imagine needing 3 separate organs just to manage disappointment. Must be nice. That night, I poured myself a generous glass of red wine and sat back down at my desk. I reopened that email from Amber and stared at the sentence, "Your old furniture will need to go." Funny how a line so simple can carry so much contempt. Old furniture. Old people. Old values. Get them out of the way. You know what they say about boiling frogs, right? If you put one in hot water, it jumps out. But if you warm the pot slowly, it sits there until it's too late. I'd been in the pot for years. Amber's laugh just turned up the heat. I went to bed that night with the image of her holding those dolls, those stupid, perfect little knitted dolls I'd made for her and Logan. They looked ridiculous, I'll admit. I even gave the Logan doll tiny felt hair gel. But what she didn't know, what she never even looked close enough to see, was that inside her doll, nestled under the yarn, heart was a 1-carat diamond, my grandmother's diamond, the one James had reset for our 50th anniversary. The one Amber had hinted about so many times it had stopped feeling accidental. I thought about all the ways I could have told her, could have called, could have explained. But something in me whispered, she doesn't deserve to know yet. Not like this. Sometimes the best lessons aren't taught, they're discovered. And the ones who dismiss you the fastest, they're often the slowest to realize what they missed. So I slept finally with a plan forming beneath the stillness, like a pearl in an oyster, slow, quiet, undeniable. The next morning, I sat at my kitchen table staring down at the small knitted dolls I'd rescued from a box marked Misk. I had to dig through layers of discarded ribbon and glittery tissue paper to find them squished beneath a scented candle someone had regifted. Their yarn faces were still smiling, oblivious to the fact they'd been humiliated in front of 50 people sipping Prosecco. I turned the doll shaped like amber over in my hands. The yarn was fraying slightly at the edge of her cream-colored dress, and I almost laughed at the irony. Even in miniature, she looked like she didn't want to be touched. Carefully, I found the almost invisible seam I'd stitched along the rib cage. My fingers, stiff with arthritis, fumbled for the tiny opening. There it was. Nestled inside, wrapped in cotton, and the faint smell of cedar was the diamond. 1 carat. Family heirloom. Completely dismissed because it wasn't presented in a velvet box with a Neiman Marcus tag. I held it up to the morning light streaming through the window. The stone caught the sun and threw fragments of rainbow across my walls. It was beautiful, untouched, undervalued. Old age wisdom moment value isn't in the price tag. It's in the effort, the intention, and the story. If someone can't see that it says more about them than it does about you. I slipped the diamond into a small velvet pouch I found in James's old dresser drawer, the one he used for cufflinks and watches he never wore. Then I tucked it away in my safe, behind the birth certificates and insurance papers, like I was preserving both treasure and truth. That afternoon, I checked my email. Amber had sent another message this time with urgent in the subject line. She needed me to sign a contract for the caterer. They'd booked a plated dinner for 150 guests and expected a wire transfer by Monday. No, hello. No, how are you? Just a request wrapped in entitlement and glazed with urgency. You know jellyfish don't have brains. They drift with the tide sting what they touch and keep on floating. That email felt like it had been written by a jellyfish. All reaction, no awareness. I didn't reply. I closed my laptop, opened a drawer, and pulled out the safe deposit key I hadn't touched in 15 years. It was time to pay a visit to a place that held more of my identity than any digital folder ever could. The old bank branch in Back Bay still smelled like lemon cleaner and anxiety. Mrs. Crane, the same manager from years ago now with silver hair and glasses perched low on her nose, led me to the vault. She didn't ask why I was there. Just smiled and said, "Still got that key, huh?" "Some things you never let go of," I replied. Inside the box was everything James and I had wanted to protect our marriage license, the deed to the Cape House baby photos of Richard, and a small cloth pouch containing rare coins. James collected each one with its own story. There was something grounding about touching those papers again. They were heavy, not in weight, but in memory. I took a moment, my hand resting on the top of the stack, and whispered, "I'm sorry, James. I should have seen this coming." And maybe I had. Maybe that little twinge I'd ignored at Christmas, the one where Richard kept mentioning trusts and minimizing tax burdens, was my gut waving a red flag. Let me drop in a debate phrase for fun. One could argue the erosion of generational respect stems from a cultural shift in interdependence models. Sounds fancy, right? But what it really means is people don't value the old ways unless they can monetize them. Judith called me later that day. I hadn't told her about the birthday party yet, but she could hear it in my voice. "Spill it." She said no pleasantries. So I did. Everything. From the dolls, to the laughter, to the diamond, to the renovation plans. When I got to the part about the mood board replacing my anniversary photo, Judith let out a hiss so sharp I had to hold the phone away from my ear. "You're telling me," she said, "they're redecorating your house, without even asking. Apparently my taste is outdated. Well, so is their decency. That's the thing about old friends. They don't sugarcoat anything. They give it to you raw like black coffee with no cream." She paused, then said, "Ellie, they're not just being rude. They're repositioning you. From matriarch to inconvenience. Don't let them." That word stuck in my head for hours. Repositioning. Like I was furniture. Heavy, outdated, and in the way. That night, I sat on the edge of my bed, holding the velvet pouch with the diamond, and I made a decision. Not out of spite. Not out of anger. But from something deeper. Something I hadn't felt in a while. Self-respect. They had plans for my house. But I had a plan too. And unlike theirs, mine didn't require anyone's permission. The email was still sitting in my inbox the next morning, staring at me like a blinking cursor of audacity. Amber had followed up with another message, slightly more panicked this time. "Hi, Grandma. Just checking in on the catering deposit. Need your signature and funds by noon today, or we lose the date." A smiley face punctuated the sentence like a threat dressed in glitter. I didn't reply. I didn't sign. I didn't send money. Instead, I printed the email and slid it into a manila folder marked Receipts. Not for taxes, just for clarity. Afterward, I slipped on my coat and took a drive out to the Cape. I needed to see the house again. Not through photos or memory, but with my own two eyes. And maybe to see if the soul of the place was still intact, or if they'd already gutted it beyond recognition. The drive was long, and my hands didn't like the steering wheel. Every pothole felt like a personal insult to my knuckles. But there was no way I was going to let Richard or Vanessa send a driver for me. That would have been the cherry on their condescending little sundae. As I approached the gravel driveway, my heart sank. There was a black SUV parked out front, not one I recognized. I pulled in slowly, trying not to imagine bulldozers in the backyard or scaffolding on the porch. But in the kitchen, I could hear voices. "The wall between the kitchen and dining area can definitely come down," a woman was saying. I stood in the doorway like a ghost at her own funeral. Actually, I said, "I do mind." They all turned at once. Amber, Vanessa, and some tan, overly cheerful woman with an iPad and a high ponytail. The designer, Eleanor Vanessa, chirped a little too loudly. "What a surprise. You're discussing demolition in my kitchen," I said. "It's not demolition," the designer offered in a tone that suggested she once taught second grade. "It's modernization. Quirky fact of the day, flamingos aren't born pink. They turn pink from the food they eat." I wonder what these women had been consuming to turn this shade of entitled. Amber stepped forward, like she was managing a client. "Grandma, we talked about this. Last Christmas, you said we could use the house for the wedding." "I said you could use it," I replied. "I didn't say you could renovate it." Vanessa chimed in. "We've packed some of the more personal items to keep them safe." I turned slowly. "What personal items?" "Oh, just small things. Photos, books." I walked into the living room. The photo of James and me on our 40th anniversary, the one in the driftwood frame we'd found on a walk, was gone. In its place was a mock-up labelled Hampton's Chic. Beige everything. A place that looked like it hated the sound of laughter and feared ketchup. On the mantel sat a small tray of paint swatches, oyster shell cream, mist luxe linen. Not a real colour among them. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't cry. I simply said, "Please leave." The designer blinked, glancing at Amber. "But we're scheduled to—" "You're not scheduled for anything anymore." They filed out slowly, gathering their swatches and dignity. Amber lingered the longest. "You're being unfair," she said quietly. "Am I?" I asked. "Or is this the first time I've said no, and you just don't know how to handle it?" That night, I found the boxes in the garage. 3 of them taped shut and labelled in black marker Eleanor's things. Inside, James's books, our wedding album, the dolls, still tangled in crumpled wrapping paper, as if they'd been mistaken for packing peanuts. The diamond, still safely nestled inside. I ran my fingers over the yarn and felt something shift in me. A hard click, like a lock being turned. The phone rang just as I was repacking the dolls. Richard. "Of course. Mum," he began. "Vanessa and I have been researching retirement options. There's a great place in Brookline, modern active community, lots of sunlight. We scheduled a tour next week, just to look." "Just to look," I repeated, my voice flat as dry toast. He didn't notice, or didn't care. "We're thinking long-term it might make sense to transfer the Cape House to a family trust. Purely for tax reasons, of course." That old lawyer's voice he used in court was creeping into his tone, carefully, persuasive, subtly invasive. "Who suggested this?" I asked. "Well, it's been a joint discussion. Vanessa, me, our advisor." I hung up without responding. I wasn't ready to explain anything. Not yet. Old age wisdom time, when someone keeps insisting it's just a suggestion. Chances are it's already a decision, they just haven't told you yet. Later that night, I found a brochure on my kitchen table. Seaside Retirement Living. This one had a different layout, slightly less glossy. The red ink circled Studio Plan C, and the note read, "More affordable." The insult was almost poetic. Downsized, literally and symbolically. I stared out the window at the city lights blinking like silent Morse code. I'd lived here for decades, raised a family, survived cancer, buried a husband. But apparently I needed supervision now, because I dared to knit dolls and refuse renovation plans. The next morning, I went to my doctor's appointment. Dr. Matthews was reviewing my chart, frowning slightly. "Your blood pressure is elevated." "Family stress," I said simply. He looked over the rim of his glasses. "Eleanor, stress at your age isn't just uncomfortable. It's dangerous. Academic debate moment. One might posit that emotional neglect, especially from one's progeny, has measurable physiological consequences in later life." I could have printed that on a t-shirt. I smiled faintly. Then maybe it's time I reduce the sauce. When I left the office, I didn't go home. I went straight to my friend Judith's favorite cafe. She was already there, sipping espresso and reading The Economist, like she was preparing for a very stylish coup. "Ellie," she said, folding the page, "your text sounded ominous." "What's happening?" I told her. Every sordid detail. She listened, like only an old friend can, no interruptions, just the occasional headshake or sharp inhale. When I was done, she said something simple but seismic. "You gave them everything. And now they think that includes your agency." I blinked. "They're not offering support. They're replacing your identity with convenience." I stirred my tea slowly. "You think I've been too soft." "I think you've been too generous," she said. "And generosity without boundaries isn't kindness. It's surrender." She was right, and I was done surrendering. I didn't sleep much that night. Instead, I sat in my living room with all the lights off, just the moonlight filtering through the window and casting long shadows across the rug. James used to say that 2 a.m. was when the truth spoke the loudest. He wasn't wrong. On the coffee table in front of me sat the boxes from the garage. Inside were the remnants of a life I had poured myself into. books with cracked spines, and my notes scribbled in the margins, photographs faded just enough to make me squint, a ceramic mug from our honeymoon in Banff that had survived 3 moves and one very spirited grandson's toddler years. And the dolls. I picked up the one that looked like Logan. His tiny felt tie had come slightly loose, and I gently tucked it back in place. The one that looked like Amber stared up at me with yarn-stitched eyes, her smile eternally cheerful, oblivious to the role she'd played in the unraveling of our family. You know sloths can hold their breath longer than dolphins. True story. They slow their heart rate and can stay underwater for 40 minutes. That night, I felt more like a sloth than a woman holding my breath, slowing down, waiting for the right moment. And the moment was now. I pulled out my worn leather address book. Yes, I still use one, and no, I don't care how quaint that makes me, and turned to C. Marcus Cooper. Estate attorney, widower, good listener, excellent taste in whiskey. James and I had worked with him years ago when we set up our wills. I hadn't spoken to him since the funeral, but when I called, he answered on the second ring. Eleanor, he said, and I could hear the surprise. It's been a while. It has, I replied, but I need your help and your discretion. We agreed to meet at a quiet coffee shop the following afternoon. He told me to bring everything: financial documents, titles, anything that mattered. You're not planning something dramatic, are you? He asked lightly. Oh, Marcus, I said. I'm not planning something dramatic. I'm planning something definitive. And that was the word. The one that had settled into my bones like a resolution. Definitive. Not reactive, not emotional. Final. The next morning, I drove to the beach house again. This time I didn't knock. I used my key, the one they'd all forgotten I still had, and walked in. It was empty, at least empty of people. The air still carried the scent of expensive candles and overly citrus cleaning products, but it was quiet. For once. I walked through each room, opening drawers, checking corners. I wasn't sure what I was looking for, but I knew I'd recognize it when I saw it. In the master bedroom, on the bedside table, there it was, a thick folder of renovation plans. Swatches of fabric Pinterest printouts, a note scrawled in Amber's handwriting, "Move this wall for bridal suite." Bridal suite. That had been my bedroom. Funny how easily they imagined peeling my life away like old wallpaper. On the dresser where James's books once sat, there was now a stack of wedding magazines and a silver tray with flavored water bottles. In my own house, I stood there for a while, staring at the mirror above the dresser. My reflection didn't flinch. She looked tired, yes, but steady, resolute. I barely recognized her. In a good way. And then I saw it. On the floor, half tucked under the bed, was a laminated flyer, probably dropped by Vanessa or the designer in one of their planning sessions. It was for a high-end wedding rental service, the kind that leases antique silverware, custom seating charts, and ironically faux vintage charm. Across the top, the tagline, "Make it yours." I smiled. Oh, I intended to. When I got back to the city, I gathered all my relevant documents, bank statements, property deeds, investment summaries. I even printed out the login notifications that showed 3 failed attempts to access my online banking. One from Richard's zip code. I met Marcus that afternoon. The same coffee shop he always used, dim warm with soft jazz playing in the background, and not a single laptop in sight. A rare unicorn in the age of co-working cafes. Marcus looked older, yes, but sharp as ever. His tie was slightly askew, which made me like him even more. He ordered us black coffee and a plate of almond biscotti. Now, he said, settling across from me, "Tell me what they've done." I told him everything. The gift incident, the renovations, the retirement plans without my consent, the trust suggestion, and of course, the unauthorized account attempts. His face darkened at that last bit. "I've seen this before," he said. "A lot more lately, in fact. Adult children positioning themselves for control under the guise of care." James would have been furious, I said. Marcus nodded. James expected better from Richard. Well, I shrugged, so did I. He reviewed the documents, tapping a pen against his lip. You're fortunate, he said finally. All the assets are still solely in your name. That gives you a lot of leverage. Good, I said, because I intend to use it. Marcus outlined a few options: freezing access to accounts, selling the property, creating a trust, but under my terms, documenting mental competence with both legal and medical records to preempt any future claims of incapacity. Once we start this, he warned, you may face pushback, especially if they realize what you're doing before the sale is final. I've faced worse, I said, and that was true. Breast cancer in my 60s, James's death, raising a son who somehow forgot where he came from. A little family drama wouldn't break me. Not this time. That evening, I sat at home with the velvet pouch in my palm. The diamond inside felt heavier than it ever had before, not because of its size, but because of what it now represented. Not just a piece of jewelry, but proof. Proof of how far someone could fall short of seeing real value, and how far I was willing to go to reclaim it. The house wasn't just a house. It was memory stitched into walls and echoes in the floorboards. James and I had bought it when we were barely more than kids ourselves, two teachers who saved and stretched every penny just to have one piece of the world that was ours. Over the years, it had held birthdays, burnt toast, mornings, late-night card games, and one incredible storm where we all slept in the living room because we were convinced the roof might blow off. But to my granddaughter, it was an event space. That thought settled into my chest like a stone as I made one last walk through of the Cape Cod beach house. This time, I wasn't there to check on what they'd changed. I was there to decide what I was taking with me before it no longer belonged to me at all. In the garage, amid the half-labeled boxes and careless stacks of picture frames, I found them 3 cardboard containers marked Eleanor's Things in black permanent marker. Not Grandma's memories, not family keepsakes, just things. Inside was the anniversary album James and I had made after our trip to the Canadian Rockies. Also inside James's maritime book collection, a box of mismatched mugs we'd acquired from random diners and road trips, and nestled in the corner, the 2 knitted dolls, still wrapped in the same slightly crinkled birthday paper. No one had opened the box again. They'd laughed, discarded, and moved on. They hadn't even noticed the diamond inside. A diamond that could have paid for the wedding Amber wanted so badly if only she had looked past the surface. But maybe that was the real metaphor. Maybe they never looked past the surface with me with anything. Old age wisdom for today. How someone handles a gift tells you everything about how they'll handle your love. I carried the dolls back into the house, placed them gently on the kitchen counter, and stared at them until the sun shifted over the bay window. I remembered knitting them through aching hands late into the night. I'd even consulted a YouTube tutorial on how to give the yarn personality. There was love in every stitch, and it had been laughed at. Not because it wasn't good, but because it wasn't branded. Later that night, I got a call from Richard. Again, I let it ring. He followed up with a voicemail. Mom, we really need to talk. We're worried about you, about the decisions you're making. There's an urgency here financially and, frankly, emotionally. Call me back. I didn't. Instead, I poured myself a glass of wine and sat in the living room surrounded by everything they thought they'd quietly removed from my life, like they could erase my presence from the place and still keep its value. Here's your quirky fact for today. Bananas are berries, but strawberries aren't. Sometimes things you think you know turn out to be more complicated and more revealing than you'd ever imagined. The next morning, I found another email from Amber. Just confirming you're handling the florist deposit. Logan's mum is offering to front it, but I told her you had it covered. Please advise ASAP. No greeting. No thank you. Just expectation. They weren't asking anymore. They were assuming. That was the moment I knew I wasn't going to tell them about the sale until it was done. Later that day, I sat with Marcus again. He laid out the contract documents on his office table with the precision of a man who'd spent decades untangling family drama in legalese. He looked at me as I signed each paper. Eleanor, he said, once this goes through, it's irreversible. Are you prepared for the fallout? I'm not just prepared. I said I'm waiting for it. He nodded, but I saw something flicker in his eyes. Sadness, maybe. Not for me, but for the idea of family lost. Marcus never had children of his own, but he'd watched enough families burn down over inheritance to know what fire looked like. Still, this wasn't about money, not really. It was about dignity, about the idea that a woman could give and give and give. And when she finally said no, the world around her would call it a breakdown. That evening, I called Thomas. Come by tomorrow, I said. I want to talk. He showed up just before dinner, with that awkward smile of his, and a box of pastries from our favourite corner bakery. He always brought pastries. It was his peace offering, even when there was no war. I poured tea. He took one look at the dolls on the counter and winced. I still can't believe she said that, he murmured. She meant it, I replied. And that's the point. He sat quietly for a moment, chewing a lemon tart. They're planning something, he said finally. I overheard Dad and Vanessa talking about an intervention. I raised an eyebrow. They think you're not well, that your choices aren't coming from a place of sound judgment. I laughed, actually laughed. The sound was hoarse and a little sharp. They think selling my own house is a symptom. They're framing it that way, he said carefully. Dad's printing out power of attorney forms. Old age wisdom alert. When someone calls your independence a symptom, it's because they don't benefit from it. I leaned forward. Thomas. I've already signed the listing agreement. The house will go on the market next week. It's being photographed tomorrow. His eyes widened. Before the wedding? Exactly before the wedding. He didn't speak for a long moment. Then he smiled, a real smile, the kind that reached the corners of his eyes. Good, he said. Good for you. I blinked. You think I'm doing the right thing? I think, he said, pushing up his glasses with a grin. It's the first time I've seen you choose you in a long time. It was a Thursday morning when I found the retirement brochure folded neatly on my kitchen counter again. The same seaside retirement living pamphlet, now with new notes scribbled in the margins, Vanessa's handwriting slanted and overly elegant. This time, she'd underlined 24-hour care on demand and circled a new floor plan labelled Deluxe Studio with partial bay view. Partial. Imagine thinking that was a selling point for someone who once woke up every morning to the full Atlantic. I laughed, not the polite kind. The kind that happens when you realize someone has mistaken your silence for permission. Old age wisdom. Let me give you a good one. Just because someone speaks slowly doesn't mean they think slowly. And just because I knit doesn't mean I'm ready to be mothballed in a beige apartment complex with themed bingo nights and decaf everything. The following day, I got a call from a local real estate agent. Not the one I'd used before. This one was younger, sharp, and came highly recommended by Marcus, Jennifer Maxwell. Known in Boston's more discreet circles as the go-to for off-market listings and quick private sales. She showed up at my Boston brownstone the next afternoon, portfolio in hand, and wearing a pair of sensible heels that said, "I'm not here to chat, I'm here to close." After walking through the Cape House photos and hearing a bit of the situation, she nodded once and said, "I know a couple looking for something exactly like this. They just sold their tech startup and want something private, coastal and quiet. Full price offer if we can skip the open house circus." "What's the timeline?" I asked. With motivation, she said, tapping her pen. 45 days. Maybe less. Perfect. While she drafted the paperwork, I made another quiet trip to the Cape. This time, not to grieve, but to reclaim. I packed up the rest of what mattered: James's coins, some letters we'd written in the first few years of marriage, and that small wooden box with his ashes still tucked inside. It felt like surgery, removing a heart from a body that no longer needed it. There was no one else there that day. No Logan, no Amber, no Vanessa click-clacking through my hallway with a tablet. Just me and the sound of gulls and the tide brushing against the shore like it was trying not to wake anyone. In the master bedroom, I saw paint swatches still taped to the wall. Cream whisper, white drift, minimal fog. Honestly, they all looked the same. Lifeless. I sat on the porch swing James had built with his own 2 hands and watched the sea. It was mid-afternoon, the kind of day where the sun seems to bounce off everything and make even your regrets look prettier. Funny thing, in ancient Rome, purple dye was so expensive that only emperors could wear it. Now you can buy a plastic tiara at the dollar store with fake amethyst gems and no one blinks. That's how value works. It shifts. But real worth doesn't need to shout. When I returned to the city, the first text came in Richard Mom. We need to talk. Family dinner. Important. I replied with 2 words, I'll come. The trap was being laid. They were going to corner me with paperwork and soft voices and long-winded concerns about my mental clarity. What they didn't know was that I'd already had a full cognitive evaluation scheduled with documentation ready to go. I also had Marcus on standby, prepared to intervene if things got legally messy. That evening I invited Thomas over again. I handed him a thin envelope. Inside was a check. A large one. What's this? He asked, stunned. An investment, I said, pouring us both tea. For your photography business. Grandma, this is too much. I can't accept this. You can and you will. He held the check like it might bite him. You've always seen me, Thomas. Not as a bank account or a backup plan. You saw the dolls. You knew what they meant. That's more than I can say for the rest of them. He sat quietly for a moment. Then, with a soft smile, he said, Dad's going to lose it. Probably. You ready for that? I've survived chemo, losing the love of my life and childbirth without an epidural. Yes, I'm ready. He laughed, and for the first time in a while, so did I. The next morning, I called Jennifer. Let's proceed. Full asking price. Privacy clause included. Understood, she said crisply. 3 days later, she had an offer from the tech couple, no inspection, no contingencies, and a promise to close in under 6 weeks. The day after that, I received another cheerful email from Amber, this time about the flower arrangements, $18,000. Due by the end of the week. We're using peonies flown in from New Zealand, she added like that was supposed to soften the blow. I didn't respond. Instead, I added that email to my growing folder of what I now called entitled receipts. It was getting thick. That evening, I sat at my old desk, watching the city lights flicker like a Morse code I couldn't quite decipher. Somewhere out there, my family was planning a wedding they thought was locked in stone. They'd planned the venue, the flowers, the catering. They'd even designed a bridal suite in my bedroom. What they hadn't planned for was me. The invitation came in a text message like all emotionally loaded ambushes do. Richard family dinner. Tomorrow night, 7 p.m. Our place. Important matters to discuss. I stared at the screen, then turned the brightness down. That helped absolutely nothing, but it felt like I was muting him a little. Important matters. I could practically smell the passive-aggressive roast chicken and legal-sized manila folders. If I had to guess, there'd be retirement brochures on the coffee table, a charade of concerned faces, and if they were really committed, a fresh notepad labelled Action Items for Mom. Old age wisdom, when people schedule an intervention and offer pot roast, you're the main course. Still, I replied, I'll be there. And then I called Marcus. They're trying to lay groundwork for incompetency, I told him. You were right. Do you want me to come with you? No. That'll make it worse. They need to see I'm not afraid. He was quiet for a beat. All right. But document everything. Record if you feel cornered, and wear something sharp. It made me smile. The next evening, I dressed like I was going to a board meeting. Navy blazer, crisp white blouse, pearl earrings. The diamond pendant remained tucked away, still hidden inside the doll for now. Let them underestimate me a little longer. When I arrived at Richard and Vanessa's home in Wellesley, it was lit like a stage. Through the window, I could see them preparing the set brochures, fanned out neatly, wine decanted, emotional manipulation rehearsed. Only Thomas stood apart, leaning near the hallway, like someone who'd lost interest in the play, but couldn't leave the theatre. Richard opened the door with a practiced smile. "Mom, so glad you came." He tried to hug me. I gave him a single pat shoulder tap. Cold, but polite, my specialty. Inside, I saw it all at once. Printouts of senior living options, glossy pamphlets for elder law specialists, and worst of all, a clipboard holding 2 blank power of attorney forms. Vanessa stepped forward, voice syrupy. "Eleanor, this isn't about taking anything away. It's about keeping you safe. Are you worried I might get kidnapped?" I deadpanned. She blinked. Amber, perched on the couch in sweatpants that probably cost more than my car tires, gave me a look like she was bracing for turbulence. Richard cleared his throat. "Mum, we're concerned. You've been making erratic choices, cancelling payments, selling furniture, moving things from the beach house without telling anyone. I'm sorry I said I didn't realize I needed a permission slip to manage my own property. It's more about transparency," he added, lawyer voice in full bloom. "We're a family." I let that sit there, like a wet sponge. Amber spoke next. "And now you're selling the house 3 weeks before my wedding." I turned to her slowly. "Your wedding venue, you mean? It was going to be the house you offered." "No, Amber. I said you could use the house. Not redesign it, not move in, and certainly not gut it into a social media backdrop." Her face flushed. "You're being vindictive." Maybe I said, but I'm also being clear. And then I stood. Because power doesn't sit. I've had a full medical workup. Cognitively, emotionally, physically, I'm fine. More than fine. I've documented it. If you attempt to challenge my legal decisions, you'll lose. The room went still. I've also spoken with my attorney. The sale of the Cape House will be final in 3 weeks. It is not reversible. The proceeds will go into accounts under my name only. Richard opened his mouth, closed it, then tried again. "You're making a mistake." "No," I said. "You made the mistake. You tried to make me feel like I was losing control, when really I was giving it away all along. That ends now." Vanessa stepped forward. "This doesn't have to be so final." "Oh, but it does," I said gently. "Because the people I trusted most showed me exactly where I stand in their priorities, somewhere between the buffet and the floral budget." Thomas, from his corner, let out a small breath. Relief, maybe. Or pride. I gathered my purse. The room was still silent. I turned to leave. "Wait," Amber said. "What about my wedding?" I paused at the door. "What about my dignity?" And then I walked out. You know octopuses can escape from sealed jars because they understand shape and memory. That night, I realized I'd finally unscrewed the lid of a jar I'd been stuck in for decades. That evening at home, I pulled out the envelope from Jennifer Maxwell. The offer. Full price. Closing in 19 days. I signed the final document slowly, carefully, like I was tucking a child into bed for the last time. There was grief there. Let's not pretend otherwise. But there was also something sharp under the surface. Something that looked an awful lot like freedom. The fallout came at 11:23 p.m., like a thunderclap, though. Instead of lightning, it was notifications. 3 missed calls from Richard. 7 texts from Amber. 2 voice messages from Vanessa with subject lines like "Urgent, please respond" and "Family emergency." The last text from Amber was in all caps. "Please tell me this isn't true." I silenced my phone. Then I took a long, slow sip of chamomile tea and went to bed. And I slept, truly slept, for the first time in months. You see, when you stop being the villain in someone else's fantasy, they start calling you unstable. And when you stop being useful, they call you cruel. But the truth is, they just never learned what it looks like when a woman enforces boundaries. Old age wisdom. It's not anger that scares people, it's clarity. The next morning, I opened the curtains to a beautiful August day. Blue sky, birds, Boston's skyline glittering across the river. And right on cue, a knock at the door. Richard, still in his jogging clothes, cheeks flushed with exertion, and something less cardio-related anger. "What the hell are you doing?" he said before I even stepped aside. "Good morning to you too, Richard." "Coffee." He didn't answer. Just paced. "You went behind our backs." A private sale, Jennifer Maxwell. You're seriously going through with this. I poured myself a cup of coffee. Slowly. With cream. It's important to stay calm when someone else is spiraling. You've sent the invitations, he said. Made the deposits. The venue is booked. You can't just cancel the wedding. I'm not canceling anything, I replied. I'm simply not hosting it. He rubbed his face clearly, trying to hold it together. This is about the birthday party, isn't it? Amber's comment. You're punishing us. No, I said. This is about patterns, and how long I've let myself be the wallpaper for your lives. I laid out a few papers on the kitchen island financial statements. Thomas had shown me records of attempted access to my accounts, the neatly folded retirement community brochures. I know about the development failure, I said. The second mortgage, the credit card debt. And I know you've been trying to reposition me as incompetent so you can access my assets. Richard paled. I was trying to protect you. From what I asked. Living in my own home, managing my own finances, choosing where my money goes. He sat down heavily, like the air had been pulled out of him. I didn't know what else to do. Ask, I said softly. You could have just asked, but you didn't. You assumed, and you maneuvered. There's an academic phrase I once heard in a philosophy class: the ethics of assumed authority often unravel in the face of direct autonomy. Well, that was happening now in real time across my dining table. Richard stared at the floor. You're really going through with it? Yes, I said. The house will be gone in 2 weeks, and you'll have to find another venue. He looked up, hollowed out. You've just turned your back on us. No, I replied more gently than I expected. I've turned toward myself. Later that day, Amber showed up mascara smudged and drama turned up to 11. Logan is freaking out, she announced. His parents are humiliated. We've had to uninvite people. I offered her a tissue. Why would you do this to me? I studied her carefully. Still beautiful, still composed, but with a crack running right through the center. Not just anger-wounded pride. I didn't do anything to you, I said. I did something for me. That house meant something to us. It meant something to me first. And clearly that didn't matter when you mocked a gift I worked weeks on. Amber winced. It was just a joke. It was a dismissal, I corrected, and I heard it loud and clear. She didn't argue. She just stood there, hands clenched, breathing like she was working up to something bigger. But then something odd happened. She stopped. Her shoulders slumped. I don't know who I'm supposed to be anymore. You could start by being someone who sees people instead of price tags. She left without slamming the door. A small victory, but I took it. That evening, I met Thomas for dinner at a cozy bistro near the Commons. I told him everything: the confrontation, the silence that followed, and the unexpected feeling of peace. I think I said over dessert, I've been walking on eggshells for so long, I forgot what the floor felt like. Thomas grinned. You know what I think? I think you're the bravest person in our family. I looked at my grandson, kind, steady, principled. The only one who didn't try to rewrite me for convenience. Don't tell me that, I said with a wink. It might go to my head. He leaned in. They're planning another meeting. Of course they are. Amber's talking about getting legal advice. Vanessa's, well, she's trying to play diplomat now. Let her, I said. I'm not negotiating my worth. As we walked home, I told him about the diamond, about how I'd hidden it in the doll, about how no one noticed. She threw it away, he asked, horrified. Maybe I said. Or maybe she still has it. But she didn't look. And that was the whole point. Sometimes the value is right there inside the thing someone laughed at. And they never even bother to check. The decision was made. There was no going back. No second guessing. The beach house was under contract. The closing date fixed. And the silence from my family thick as clotted cream. No more panicked texts. No more thinly veiled interventions. Just a brittle quiet, like they were all collectively holding their breath and waiting for me to change my mind. Spoiler alert, I didn't. Jennifer called mid-morning. Good news, she said, with the brisk cheer of a woman who had made a career out of handling emotional sales with the grace of a diplomat. The buyers want to accelerate closing. They'll offer an additional $50,000 if you can be out within 10 days. I glanced at the calendar. 10 days. That would be exactly 3 weeks before Amber's wedding. Perfect. Tell them yes, I said. Later that day, I drove to the Cape alone one last time. It was early September. The kind of day when the sun's warm, but not punishing the breeze, still carrying traces of salt and dried seagrass. I parked by the familiar driftwood fence and stood there for a long moment, just looking at the house. James had once painted the shutters himself, muttering about ridiculous designer colours, but secretly proud of the result. They were still that same sea glass green. Inside, I moved through each room slowly, not to say goodbye, but to take stock. I packed only what mattered. A stack of photo albums, James's maritime books, my favourite soup pot. I left the dishes. I left the guest linens. I left the housewarming candles Amber had given me 4 Christmases ago, each in a different seasonal scent, all still unopened. In the master bedroom, there was a new mock-up taped to the closet door. Bridal suite concept, it read. There were swatches in blush and gold. A proposed custom headboard shaped like a seashell. The doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone. When I opened the door, I came face to face with Amber's wedding planner. Clipboard. Polished smile. Soft designer flats. "Oh, Mrs. Thompson," she said, startled. "We weren't expecting anyone today. I'm just here to measure for the tent placement on the lawn." "No need," I replied, stepping aside to block her view. "The wedding plans have changed." She blinked. "Changed. I'm sorry Amber didn't. She doesn't know yet." The woman looked like she wanted to melt into the hedges. "Should I leave? That would be best." She retreated down the walkway like a diplomat evacuating a very delicate situation. Which, to be fair, it was. After she left, I locked the front door. Then I sat down in the living room alone. No swatches, no samples, no laughter. Just the sound of the waves in the distance and the creak of the house breathing in its last quiet week with me. Later that night, I called Marcus. "It's happening sooner," I told him. "Next week." "I'll move everything up," he said. "We'll finalize on Thursday." "Thank you, Marcus." A pause. "How are you feeling?" I looked out the window. Boston lights shimmered across the river, blinking like tired eyes, like I'm watching the scaffolding fall off a house I didn't realize I'd outgrown. The next evening, I invited Thomas over again. Roast chicken, his favorite. Candles. No drama. "I have news," I said. He was halfway through a forkful of potatoes when he froze. "You sold it already. Closing in 10 days. He let out a low whistle. "They're going to lose it." "I'm not worried," I said. "I've got a moving company scheduled new accounts set up, and Marcus on speed dial." He looked at me across the table, eyes soft behind his smudged glasses. "You're really doing this?" "I am." "Why me?" he asked after a moment. "Why tell me first?" "Because I said you're the only one who hasn't tried to manage me." He smiled, the kind that sneaks up your face and warms it from the inside. "Dad's going to try one last time, you know. Probably with flowers and guilt." "Let him try," I said. "I'm not mad anymore. I'm just finished. Old age wisdom. Here's one from my mother. When someone shows you a knife, don't argue about the handle, step back." The next day, Jennifer emailed the final paperwork. The wire transfer would complete the sale. I signed with hands that didn't shake. That night I didn't cry. I thought I might. But no, instead I made tea, lit a candle, sat on my couch and watched the glow flicker across the room like soft breath. It was the most peaceful I'd felt in years. Then came the knock at the door. I opened it to find Logan Amber's ex-fiancé, alone. He held his hands up, sheepish. "Don't worry. I'm not here to cause a scene." I let him in, curious. "I wanted to apologize," he said, standing awkwardly in my entryway. "For the party, for laughing. It was disrespectful." I studied him carefully. His posture was different, less cocky, more grounded. "Why now?" I asked. "Because when you made your decision about the house, I started seeing things differently. The way everyone responded, It showed me a side of this family I hadn't really paid attention to before. He paused, and I thought, if I was going to be part of that family, I should probably think harder about what that meant. There it was. Sincerity. Actual rare sincerity. Thank you, I said. That means something. He nodded and left quietly. No ask, no agenda. Just a young man slowly recognizing a truth bigger than himself. And maybe that was the beginning of something. Or maybe it was just a moment. But it mattered. The following morning, I got the call from Jennifer. All funds are in. The sale has officially closed. I stood in my living room, phone to ear, heart surprisingly steady. There was no fanfare, no dramatic music swelling in the background. Just quiet. Resolute, echoing quiet. The Cape Cod beach house, my beach house, was no longer mine. It had changed hands quietly, without ceremony. No toasts, no goodbyes. Just a wire transfer and a legally binding contract. I hung up the phone, stood there for a moment, and then slowly I smiled. It wasn't a smile of victory. It was a smile of release. Sometimes freedom doesn't come with fireworks. It comes with paperwork. Later that day, the messages started rolling in again. Richard, mother. I'm disappointed you proceeded with this reckless action. We need to discuss damage control immediately. Vanessa, Eleanor. I hope you realize what you've done to this family. Amber is absolutely devastated. Amber, a flurry of texts, 16 to be exact. The last one read, "My life is ruined, and it's your fault. You know what's not my fault? Planning your entire wedding on property you didn't own." Quirky fact of the day. There's a species of jellyfish that can technically live forever. You know what it does when it's stressed. It reverts back to its juvenile form and starts over. I didn't realize how much I related to that jellyfish until this moment. I muted my phone again and poured myself a glass of wine. That evening, I had dinner with Thomas at my place. I told him over grilled salmon. He raised his eyebrows. It's done. It's done. He exhaled slowly, like he hadn't realized he'd been holding his breath. And how do you feel? Lighter. Like the beach house never existed. No, I said, smiling softly. Like it always will. Just not in the way they think. He nodded. They're planning another meeting. I rolled my eyes. Of course they are. I heard Dad talking to a lawyer. Vanessa's suggesting they build a case to challenge your capacity. Old age wisdom. When people can't control you, they'll try to control how others perceive you. I looked at him carefully. Thomas, are you afraid they'll come after you next? He blinked. Why would they? Because I gave you the money. He sat back. You think they'll find out? They always do. He ran a hand through his hair, something he did when he was overwhelmed. What should I do? Nothing, I said. Live your life. Build your business. Be who you are, not who they expect. He looked up, eyes softer now. I'm proud of you, Grandma. It caught me off guard. Thank you. Also, he added with a mischievous smile, can I help you pack? I laughed. Yes, you absolutely can. We spent the rest of the evening labeling boxes. One pile for donation. One for the condo. One for Thomas, who tried to claim my 1970s fondue set, like it was buried treasure. You sure you want this? Are you kidding? He said. It's retro gold. That weekend, I met with a real estate agent who specialized in active senior properties. She showed me 3 condos in Cambridge. All were light-filled modern, with elevators security, and not a floral curtain in sight. The third one had floor-to-ceiling windows and a view of the Charles River. I think this is it, I told her. By Monday, I'd made an offer. By Wednesday, it was accepted. I was downsizing, but not retreating. And that's an important distinction. I wasn't moving into a home for the elderly. I was moving into a home for me. A place that didn't carry the burden of history. A place where I wouldn't be rewritten by other people's expectations. When I told Thomas, he nearly dropped his coffee. You're moving next month. Why not? He grinned. You really don't do things halfway, do you? No, darling, I said. I'm 79. Halfway is for people with time to waste. Then, of course, Richard showed up. Unannounced. Again. It was late. I was packing up a shelf of old cookbooks when he rang the doorbell. I opened it to find him standing there with a forced smile and a folder under his arm. Mom, we need to talk. I assumed that's why you're here. He stepped inside and sat down like he owned the chair. You're buying property in Cambridge. I am. Without consulting me. I wasn't aware I needed your consultation to make a decision about where I live. He sighed, exasperated. You're being unreasonable. No, I said. I'm being independent. You're confusing the two. He rubbed his face. Amber's wedding is off. I paused. I'm sorry. She's devastated. I'm sure. He leaned forward, the mask cracking. Logan's family pulled their support. His parents think our family is unstable. I tilted my head. Well, that's the first accurate thing they've said. He glared. You think this is funny? No, I said calmly. I think it's tragic that you'd rather rewrite my life than accept my choices. We sat in silence. Then he asked the question that had probably been burning in his gut for weeks. Why are you doing this? I looked him straight in the eye. Because I've spent my whole life keeping the peace, sacrificing, being supportive. And when I finally said no, you all treated it like an act of war. So I'm declaring independence. He blinked. From us. From your expectations? As he stood to leave, he said, You're going to regret this. No, Richard, I said. You are. The next few days passed like the quiet before a thunderstorm. The sale was done, the new condo was mine, and the moving boxes were steadily disappearing into their new places. But something hung in the air, like static, awaiting. I knew they wouldn't let things rest. The text came on a Saturday afternoon, just as I was trying to figure out whether I wanted to keep a ceramic rooster I'd painted in a class back in '87. I decided no, but the message distracted me. Amber, can we talk just us? I stared at it for a moment, then typed, tomorrow, Cafe Nero, 2 p.m. It was the same cafe I'd taken her to as a little girl, where she used to insist on hot chocolate with extra whipped cream and would always spill at least a little on the table. She was 29 now, and I still half expected her to show up in pigtails, but she didn't. She arrived with sunglasses too big for her face, a tight smile, and a bouquet of silence around her that even the barista seemed to tiptoe around. She slid into the booth, didn't take off the glasses. Why, she asked. I didn't pretend to misunderstand. You know why? Her jaw clenched. I was embarrassed. Okay. The gift looked homemade. Everyone was watching. I nodded. And now you're the one being watched. She flinched. There was a long pause. Logan dumped me, she said finally. 3 weeks after the wedding was cancelled. He's dating some lifestyle influencer now. I didn't say I'm sorry. I didn't need to. My silence was enough. She exhaled. Dad says you ruined everything. And what do you think? I think... She paused. I think I didn't see you. Not really. I saw someone I could count on to say yes. That's not the same as love. She looked down. No, it's not. Then I asked gently, do you still have the dolls? She blinked. The dolls. The ones I made. A long silence. She looked uncomfortable. I think I put them in a storage bin. I didn't throw them away, she added quickly. You might want to check, I said, sipping my coffee. There's something inside. What? A diamond. Her eyes widened. You're joking. I'm not. I didn't know. I know you didn't. She went quiet again. For a long time. Why would you do that? She asked finally. Because I believed in your future. I still do. Tears welled in her eyes, but she blinked them back. I don't deserve it. That's not how gifts work. When we stood to leave, she hesitated. I don't know how to fix all of this. Start by finding the dolls. She gave me a shaky smile. I'll try. That night, I returned home to find Vanessa waiting on my front steps. She wore tailored slacks, perfect makeup, and the faint look of someone who hadn't slept well in weeks. Ellie, she said, as I opened the door, I owe you an apology. I blinked. I pushed the brochures. The retirement home talk. The power of attorney. That was me, not Richard. And why are you telling me now? Because she said Richard and I are separating. I wasn't surprised, just sad in a quiet, distant way. The financial stress, the pressure. And honestly, she looked me in the eye. I didn't like who I became. Manipulative, entitled. You didn't deserve that. I gestured for her to sit. We shared a pot of tea in the living room, and she told me things I'd never expected to hear, how her own mother had been sidelined in the same way, how fear of aging and loss had turned into control, disguised as care. I see it now, she said. I didn't then. Old age wisdom, redemption isn't always dramatic. Sometimes it's just someone finally owning what they broke. Before she left, she looked around my new home and smiled. It suits you. Thank you. You've changed. I've returned, I corrected. That evening, I called Judith. You won't believe today, I said, detailing the twin visits. Judith, always the pragmatist, laughed. What did I tell you? Sometimes they come back with humility like stray cats that got rained on. We laughed together, a warm sound that filled the room like an old song. Later that night, as I sorted through a final box of kitchen items, I found the dolls. Not the ones I'd given Amber. Those were still out there, maybe, but the prototype ones I'd made during the design process. Smaller, a little wonky, but endearing. I placed them on the windowsill. They weren't beautiful, but they were mine. The morning air had begun to carry that early October bite, the one that makes you pull your cardigan a little tighter and reach for the good coffee. The kind you save for no one in particular, just a day when you need to feel solid again. That was today. Because today Richard emailed, subject line coffee. No other words, just that. I didn't respond immediately. I took a walk first, listened to the leaves underfoot, let my thoughts spool out into the open. By the time I returned, I knew what I was going to say. Sure, Equidistant Cafe, 11 a.m. Tuesday. The one halfway between our homes. Neutral territory. A good place for diplomacy or difficult truths. He arrived on time. Dressed down surprisingly, jeans, sweater, no tie. It made him look 10 years younger and strangely more tired. You look well, he said carefully. The new place agrees with me. I can tell. We sat, ordered coffee. It was the most ordinary start to what we both knew was going to be a conversation full of sharp edges. I heard you met with Amber, he said. I did. She told me. And Vanessa too. You've been talking with them. People grow when they're uncomfortable, I said, stirring sugar into my cup. It's a painful process, but occasionally worthwhile. He nodded slowly. I've been meaning to say. He looked down. You were right, about everything. I didn't rush in with forgiveness. I let him sit in that silence, let him taste the admission. I should have just asked for help. I was so scared of looking weak. And the development failure, I thought I could fix it before you noticed. And when you couldn't, I said you tried to manipulate your way to a solution. Yes, old age wisdom moment, confession is the door. Accountability is the key. Without both, it's just noise. I've taken a job, he added. A non-profit legal clinic. Small, nothing glamorous. But honest work. I was surprised and glad. You're helping people again. I'm trying to. We sat in companionable silence for a moment. I've been staying with Thomas, he said next. He's been gracious. He's always been better than we deserved, I said, smiling. I know about the investment, Richard said. I raised an eyebrow. Do you? He told me, not the amount, just that you believed in him. I always have. You just couldn't see it through your own reflection. He nodded, shame barely veiled. I lost track of what mattered. Status, appearances, money. I thought they protected us. They isolate us, I corrected gently. And when the mask slips, the ones we pushed away are too far to reach. Richard looked older than I remembered. Not just in his face, but in his posture. In the way he sat. Deflated, but maybe finally open. I'm not asking for anything, he said. No money, no favors. Just a chance to rebuild something honest. I took a sip of my coffee, let the warmth settle before I spoke. With boundaries. Yes, he said, with boundaries. Afterward, outside the cafe, he hesitated. I miss the house, he said. Not for what it could have been, just the memories. I looked out at the leaves turning over the Charles River. You don't have to own a place to carry its stories. He nodded. Thank you. For everything. For holding the line. I didn't do it for revenge, I said. I did it because I had to remember who I was before I disappeared entirely. Later that evening, I sorted through old photo albums. I pulled out a few shots of Richard from his childhood, one of him building a sandcastle with James, one flying a kite, one mid-cannonball into the bay. I had them framed and delivered to his small apartment with a note. The most valuable assets can't be sold or transferred. They live in us. The next morning, something unexpected happened. A text from Amber, found something I think belongs to you. Can I bring it over? She arrived an hour later with a small paper bag. Her face was less drawn, the posture less defensive. Inside the bag, the dolls. Amber placed them on my coffee table like rare artifacts. She'd even cleaned them up, restitched a loose arm, gently brushed the yarn hair. I found them in a box I'd forgotten about, she said. At first I wasn't going to open it, but something told me to look. She reached into the female doll fingers, searching gently. Then her breath caught. The diamond. It glittered in her palm like the truth finally made tangible. It's real, she whispered. Yes. All this time, you never looked, I said softly. You never even thought to. Her eyes welled. I don't deserve this. Maybe not, I said. But gifts aren't about deserving. They're about love. She placed the diamond and the dolls on the table. I can't take it, she said. Not after everything. But I needed you to know I found it. And I finally understood. I nodded. Good, I said. That's enough. 2 weeks later, the condo felt less like a new space and more like mine. The last of the boxes were gone, and the furniture modest, clean-lined and comfortable, fit in a way my old brownstone never allowed. There were no dusty antiques here. No ghosts. Just light and quiet. I didn't miss the chaos. I missed the simplicity of knowing where I stood. But then, 1 year to the day after Amber's infamous birthday party, I decided to do something unexpected. I hosted a dinner. Not a lavish affair, just a small gathering in my new home. Thomas came, of course, with his partner Emily, a sweet girl with a wicked sense of humour and a fondness for old jazz records. Richard came alone, but wearing a shirt I hadn't seen since James's funeral. Judith arrived carrying her famous pear tart. Even Marcus showed up, bottle of wine in hand, looking pleasantly amused to be among what he called the drama survivors circle. And then last unexpectedly came Amber. She walked in carrying a bouquet of fall flowers. Real ones. Not the tightly wound, over-perfumed arrangements she used to favor, but soft chrysanthemums and fading sunflowers. Wild, uneven. Beautiful. Happy housewarming, she said, kissing my cheek. Belated, I said. I know, she replied, but I'm here now. That was enough. The meal was simple. Roast chicken, seasonal vegetables, and of course Judith's tart. We laughed, we lingered. We left the past to rest for one evening. At one point during dessert, Thomas stood glass in hand. To Grandma Eleanor, he said, raising his glass. Who taught us that it's never too late to stand up for yourself? Amber added softly. And that real value doesn't always look the way we expect it to. I met her eyes across the table. This was not the girl who had once laughed at my knitted dolls. She was someone new. After the others left, Amber stayed behind. She helped me clear the table, humming absently as she rinsed plates at the sink. I dried. I have something for you, she said suddenly, pulling a small box from her bag. Inside was a silver pendant, a single familiar diamond set into a delicate chain. You said I could keep it? She began, but I wanted to give it back in a way that felt right. I ran my thumb over the stone. It sparkled gently under the kitchen light. I had it reset, she said, so you could wear it. Not save it, not hide it. I fastened the chain around my neck, the metal cool against my skin. It's beautiful, I said. And it was. Funny, she added. I used to think meaning came from price tags. From perfection. Now I think Maybe it comes from intention. You're learning, I said, smiling. I'm trying, she replied. That night, after she left, I stood by the window overlooking the river. The pendant rested lightly against my chest, catching a glint of moonlight. I thought of the beach house not with bitterness, but with tenderness. I imagined it now filled with someone else's laughter, new family memories forming within its walls. It no longer hurt, because I was no longer trying to preserve a version of myself tied to a building. The real foundation had always been within me. Sometimes it just takes a storm to see how strong it really is. The next morning, Vanessa called. Her voice was softer now, less performative. I heard about your dinner, she said. It wasn't an event, I replied. It was just dinner. I hope someday we can have one too, she said. Maybe I said, someday. That afternoon, I had lunch with Judith again. I saw Amber's gift, she said, touching the pendant around my neck. It suits you. It's full circle, I said. No, she corrected. It's a new circle. Later that evening, Richard texted me a photo, 3 framed pictures hanging in his apartment, all from the beach house. Him as a boy with James. With me. With sand in his shoes and joy on his face. Beneath it, a caption, "Thank you for reminding me what matters." I didn't reply. Some things don't need words. Autumn came quickly that year. One moment I was watering the last of the summer geraniums on the balcony, and the next I was pulling sweaters from storage and sipping cinnamon tea by the window, watching the river trees blush gold and rust. The world was quiet again, but in a new way. Not the isolation of grief or the silence of being ignored. This was chosen solitude, comfortable, warm, mine. One morning, I woke with an idea. I pulled out the old sketchbook I hadn't touched in years. The one where I used to draw patterns for the dolls, scribble notes for sewing projects, and even write small snippets of dialogue like they were speaking back to me. I flipped to a blank page and began to write. Not a list, not a plan, but a story. About a woman who had lost everything except herself, and how that had turned out to be enough. I didn't know what it would become. A memoir. A small book for Thomas to illustrate, maybe nothing more than ink on paper. But I kept writing. By the end of the week I had 15 pages, then 30, then 50. Judith read them first. She cried on the 3rd page, laughed out loud on the 5th. She called me at midnight just to say, "Eleanor, this is good, like publishable good." I shrugged. Maybe I just needed to hear myself think. But something stirred. A few days later, Thomas emailed me a mock-up of a book, cover a sketch of my yarn dolls under the title The Thread That Held Me. I stared at it for a long time. Then I opened a new document and kept going. Meanwhile, life in its quiet way began moving forward. Richard sent me updates about his new job at the legal clinic, small wins, the kind that don't make headlines, but change lives. He seemed lighter. There was no groveling, no dramatic reconciliation, just a series of respectful texts. I responded when I felt like it. Amber enrolled in a design course at a community college. She sent me pictures of color swatches, mood boards, even an early concept for a doll of her own. "Still learning," she wrote in the caption, "but thinking of you with every stitch." Vanessa, true to her word, stayed away, but sent a holiday card in early December. Handwritten. No pretense. Progress. One afternoon, I visited the new family that had bought the Cape House. They'd sent me a letter weeks before, thanking me for building such a beautiful place with so much love. The mother, Naomi, had invited me to tea. I almost didn't go, but then I did. And when I stood in the entryway of the house that used to be mine, I didn't feel grief. I felt something more surprising. Pride. Naomi showed me what they'd done, updated the kitchen, repainted the shutters, a soft dove grey. "I hope that's not sacrilege," she said, laughing. "It's perfect," I told her. "It's yours now." She led me to the sunroom, where her daughter, maybe 7 years old, was curled up with one of the very dolls I'd left behind. She'd named her Clementine. "I didn't even know it was handmade," Naomi said. "She found it in the closet and fell in love. I reached out gently, brushing the yarn hair. I made her. The girl looked up. You did. I did, I said. Thank you, she whispered. And just like that, the circle closed. I returned home that night, lighter than I'd left. I opened the last chapter of my story, the one I hadn't written yet. The ending. How do you end a story that isn't about endings? Maybe like this. I didn't lose my house. I gave it a new story. I didn't lose my family. I let them meet me as I am. I didn't lose my worth. I reclaimed it. The next morning, I walked to the river with Thomas. We sat on a bench, warm drinks, in hand breath visible in the crisp air. He looked at me and asked, "What's next?" I smiled. "Whatever I want." And for the first time in my life, I meant it. The first snowfall came early that year, soft, delicate, like powdered sugar over the rooftops. From my window, Cambridge looked like a quiet watercolor. I sat with a mug of ginger tea, watching it fall, feeling a kind of stillness that wasn't empty, but earned. It had been a full year, a year since the birthday party, a year since the dolls, a year since I stood up from the table and said enough. I marked the anniversary not with sadness, but with something simple. I put on the silver chain with the diamond Amber had returned, tied my hair back, and walked to a bookstore 2 blocks away. Because that afternoon, I was doing something I never imagined I'd do at 79 years old. I was giving a reading from the thread that held me. It had started as a side project. Then Thomas showed the manuscript to a small local publisher. They were intrigued. Judith helped me polish it. Marcus advised me on contracts. And now, somehow, it was real. The store had set up a few dozen folding chairs, though more people showed up than expected. Old friends, curious neighbors, even a few women I didn't know, but who introduced themselves with soft voices and eyes that said, "I understand more than I can explain." Thomas stood in the back, beaming. Judith had her phone up, recording every second. And Amber. She arrived quietly, sat in the front row, wore no makeup, brought no entourage, just herself. When it was my turn, I walked to the podium and looked out at the small sea of faces. "I want to thank you all for being here," I began. "This story isn't about revenge. It isn't about regret. It's about waking up." I read a few passages softly, clearly. The ones about the dolls, about the dinner where I refused to sign, about finding peace not in forgiveness, but in reclaiming the self that had been edited out of my own life. When I finished, there was a pause. Then applause, gentle but real. Afterward, Amber approached me. She didn't speak at first, just hugged me hard. "You were never invisible," she whispered. "We just refused to see." I held her close. "You're seeing now." Later that night, back in my apartment, I placed a small frame on my writing desk. A photo of James Me Richard as a toddler, all at the Cape House before the paint had dried, and before the disappointments had gathered like dust. Below the photo, I'd written a single line, "I was always here." The dolls now sat in the glass cabinet by the bookshelf, neither shrine nor warning, just memory. Next to them, a single unopened letter from the publisher, early numbers on pre-orders. I didn't rush to open it, because success wasn't the point. Telling the story was living it, really living it was. The next morning, I stood on my balcony as the sun rose over the river. The world looked clean, new, like anything was possible. And maybe that's the lesson no one tells you about late life. There are still beginnings, still surprises, still versions of yourself waiting to be unboxed, rediscovered, maybe even stitched back together. I am Eleanor Thompson, mother, widow, seamstress, author. And finally, my own